All right, I want to bring in my legal panel now. Avery Friedman, a civil rights attorney and law professor in Cleveland, and Richard Herman, a New York criminal defense attorney and law professor, joining us from Las Vegas. Good to see you both. Happy New Year.
Hi,
Fred. Happy New Year.
Okay, so Avery, you just heard the president. He said no collusion, no crime. He's open. What do you make of all that he has said?
Well, I mean, there is no such crime as collusion. This is a case of obstruction. He's not saying no obstruction. He's saying no collusion. And the blockbuster information about the White House counsel, Don McGahn, trying to lobby Jeff Sessions from recusing himself. Look, the last thing Jeff Sessions wanted to do, Frederica, is recuse himself. But when you run a campaign and then you become an official, he had no choice. The ethics rules required it, and he was afraid it was going to go public. Well, on March 1st, the Washington Post identified what that was. On March 2nd, Jeff Sessions recused himself. So whether or not Reince Priebus, whether or not Sean Spicer, whether or not Don McGahn attempted to stop him from recusing himself, he did. He knew he had to, and that's where the case is.
And Richard, is that your feeling as well, that Jeff Sessions, swore to an oath, and so as a result, he had to recuse himself?
Yeah, my feeling, Fred, is that in the history of our great republic, there has never been a president this ignorant of the law and this ignorant of the Constitution and unwilling to educate himself. Sessions had no choice under the law but to recuse himself. And for the president to say he should never recuse himself, what is he talking about? What is he basing that on?
Well, his argument, haven't we heard the president make the argument in varying ways that the Attorney General should be loyal to the president, should be protecting the president, just like he said Eric Holder protected President Obama, just like Robert Kennedy protected JFK. That's what we heard from the president. Is he right?
But the Attorney General is the Attorney General for the United States. He's not the Attorney General for personal Donald Trump to get him out of his fixes. And that's why he wanted to keep Sessions in there, because he thought Sessions would be loyal to him and derail the investigation by Mueller. And that is another building block, Fred, for the obstruction of justice, which, by the way, is overwhelming at this time. Mueller has obstruction of justice. They have the intent required. They have the elements of it. You have the less. And Trump, he needs to study. If the Constitution is too overwhelming, start with the Fifth Amendment, self-incrimination, because he incriminates himself. That Lester Holt interview, he admitted to obstruction in that, meeting with his boys in the Oval Office and saying that this Comey investigation, I had to get rid of him because he was nuts and it put a lot of pressure. This is obstruction, Fred.
Yeah, and he said to get rid of the Russia thing. Okay, so if it's overwhelming, then, Avery, obstruction of justice, and there are all of these examples that the two of you have just spelled out, then what is Robert Mueller waiting for? Or does it simply mean that's just the tip of the iceberg, potentially?
Yes.
Well, that's a great question, because what he's waiting for is to make sure he has every bit of evidence to show the key element in an obstruction, and that is willful interference. That's what's in the statute. So he's got Sean Spicer's statement. He's got Reince Priebus' personal notes from the meeting. And remember the chronology. Comey gets fired on the 10th of May. On the 11th of May, Trump meets with Russian officials saying, oh, man, there was so much pressure on me, and that's gone. And then on the 11th, of course, the infamous or famous, depending on how you look at it, interview with Lester Holt, where he says, yeah, I got rid of Comey because of the Russia investigation. So, yeah, there's important evidence, but Mueller is conservative. He's acting the right way, and you need to be careful because you need to show that intent.
And then, Richard, even though Sean Spicer has said in a recent interview that, he wasn't a party to trying to convince anyone to or convince, Sessions not to recuse himself, what does this mean if potentially even Sessions may have had one of his own aides go to Capitol Hill to try to get dirt on James Comey to help justify his imminent firing or removal? What about all of that? Is that, too, part of a potential obstruction issue, even though Sessions did recuse himself? I know it's very complicated, yes, but I know you're following
yes.
me.
No, you're absolutely right. And obstruction cases are built on building blocks, and they have so many examples of it, Fred. It's overwhelming right now. There is obstruction. Mueller's got that. The reason he's not stopped is because he's also looking at conspiracy between Trump and the Russians. That's what he's looking at right now. He's looking at money laundering. That's what he's looking at. This is a comprehensive examination. Remember, Bill Clinton was investigated by Congress and the special prosecutor on Whitewater, and it ended up on Monica Lewinsky.
Floated to the top.
You don't need... And whether or not collusion is a crime or not, the fact of the matter is there was a criminal investigation going on, and the President of the United States sought to impede that with a malicious intent, the intent required to get obstruction. They've got it, Fred. I'm telling you, they've got it. And for Trump to say there's no collusion, there absolutely is collusion. Look at the meetings at Trump Tower. Come on. It's ridiculous. People have to wake up. And you have these enablers. You have these enablers and these co-conspirators in government, the Republicans in Congress that stand by him, that it's like the emperor's new clothes. They won't step up to protect the country.
So Avery, is the issue, I mean, the president says he's...
Again.
And Avery, you know, the president says he's not under investigation, but is it the case that really everyone under that big, you know, tent or umbrella is under investigation until they're not?
Well, that's a wonderful way of putting it. That's exactly what's going on here. Of course the president's under investigation. I mean, Flynn didn't plead to a crime because he wasn't under investigation. Manafort isn't indicted because he wasn't under investigation. These individuals were all participating, and it gets right down to the question of willful obstruction. And that intent issue is why Mueller is being so careful here. And frankly, while I don't want to say the evidence is overwhelming, it is substantial. And Mueller's going to pull the trigger when he thinks it's time. But it is substantial evidence.
Wow. All right. That word willful, operative. You said willful interference, willful obstruction. We got to remember all that as we continue to learn more or not. Avery Friedman, Richard Herman. Thank you. Always good to see y'all.
16 years, Fred. Begin 16 years with us together.
Oh, my gosh. Where does the time go?
Coming up on 17.
I love it. Well, you know, it's amazing. It's been an amazing decade and a half with you guys, and I appreciate your dedication, your smarts all the time. Love you both.
Appreciate you.